All right, a whole lot going on today with respect to the aviation sector, respect to the markets. Let's kick off with Spirit Airlines filing for bankruptcy protection here. Largest passenger airline to file for bankruptcy protection in a decade. As I just mentioned, lost more than $2.2 billion since 2020, pretty much the start of the pandemic. However, the company says that it will still continue to fly even while bankruptcy proceedings are ongoing. So again, this is an airline, a budget airline that offered low-cost fares to users and was pretty much seen as a disruptor. But of course, there's been some headwinds that have impacted the company. We're going to get to that with our guests. Still on the aviation sector, let's get to Ethihad Airways. The Middle East, of course, making all the news. Their 9-month 2024 earnings coming in at $5 billion as far as revenue, a 21% year-on-year growth. They transported 14 million passengers in the first 9 months of this year, a 35% increase year-on-year compared to 9-month 2023. Look at their cargo revenue, that also grew by 21%, 815 million. Profit after tax, 368 million, a 66% growth year-on-year for Etihad Airways. It's just nothing but good news coming out of the Middle East. Yesterday, we're looking at the United Arab Emirates having its stock market valued at over $1 trillion. So just one thing after another. The Middle East making all the headlines. Let's get to Boeing now. This, of course, is not necessary. This is not a good headline, though. Boeing, of course, has begun its layoffs. It's actually started issuing letters to employees. They do require 60 days notice, so they will remain on payroll until January. They're planning to cut about 17,000 jobs. It's going to impact about 10% of their staff. Boeing, of course, we've been following all the challenges that they've had. Their CEO, Dave Calhoun, he stepped down. There's a new person in. They faced congressional hearings, faced investigations, safety issues. A lot going on with Boeing there. Let's get to our guest in London, Sindy Foster, who, of course, is a principal managing partner at Avaero Capital Partners. Sindy, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with Spirit Airlines, though. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you make of this bankruptcy protection filing of the company.
Morning, Rotas. It was inevitable, really, given the challenges it has faced over the last 5 years. No profit for the last 5 years. It's been obvious that they've got challenges. The JetBlue merger might have helped them, avoid some of these challenges, but obviously that was blocked. So once they were no longer able to continue the talks with Frontier, the market was really looking for what next. The Chapter 11 protection actually gives them an opportunity to sort themselves out. They had some debt which needed to be paid down in 2025 and 2026, and it looked like that was not going to be likely. So this has given them an opportunity to restructure their business and continue flying.
Now, what do you make of the blocking, the antitrust of remarks, or rather the antitrust move to block that merger with JetBlue? And I guess with President-elect Trump coming in, he is seen as a deregulator that would possibly allow some of these deals to go through. What's your view on what that would mean for the aviation industry in the U.S.?
Well, hindsight, can be seen as a virtue, and you can look at it in two ways. At the time when they made the decision, there were strong reasons why. Allowing the merger would have created a consolidation in the market that may have led to increased fares and would have been damaging to consumers. So that's the main justification of why they decided not to allow it. But in doing so, it meant that Spirit didn't have a way out of its problems, in a expedient way. So it was one of those things which, if this Chapter 11 process doesn't go to plan, people will look back at that and say that was a mistake. If the Chapter 11 process is an efficient method of changing the future dynamics of the airline, people will see that it's the right decision. So there are some people sitting on one side of the fence, others on the other side of the fence. So I think time will tell whether it was the right thing or not. Now, a judge has deemed it antitrust. So whether the new president will come in and change that is debatable. It might create some issues there. But there's still the potential of a consolidation or merger, because what some people think is that Frontier may look at this business in distress and wait for it to get to a level where it can really benefit by getting the airline at a lower price, and then, either buying it, merging with it, or asset stripping. So we know that Spirit Airlines is actually getting rid of about 10% or just over 10% of its fleet to reduce costs. So that's going to be a good move in terms of other airlines looking at how it can acquire some aircraft, given the lack of aircraft capacity that we've got in the market at the moment.
What do you make of Spirit's low fare model, considering the financial troubles they ran into? What do you make of that budget airline model?
Well, the budget airline model really drove a lot of growth in the market and was a benefit for a long time. It relies on stability, really, for it to make economic and financial sense. So just to explain to some of our viewers what it actually means. So legacy carriers, traditional airlines, typically sold seats, and that was basically all they sold. But you had some airlines which came into the market which were really looking at selling seats at the lowest possible cost. And the way that they did it was having a base fare and an ancillary revenue. So it's a non-seat revenue part of their total revenues. And the base fare quite often didn't cover the full cost of operations, but it was offset with these fares, with these sort of revenues which came in through other things. So things like change fees, baggage fees, check-in fees, all those extra additional things. And those were the sort of flying related ones. But over time, it's expanded to some other revenues, which are non-flying revenue, ancillary revenues as well. So we tend to call it ancillary revenue and other revenues in the market now. But if you've got a rising inflationary environment where wages are higher, lease rates are higher, salaries obviously are higher linked to the inflation, and fuel possibly is higher. You've got external costs which you don't have any control over. And if your revenue is dependent on people being able to pay those extra charges, you've now got a gap in your revenue, which I think is one of the reasons why we've seen Spirit Airlines and similar airlines entering into problems. So whilst the legacy carriers are able to have a direct correlation between bums on seats and the revenue, the low-cost carriers, ultra-low-cost carriers, can have a full aircraft and still not be making enough revenue to cover their operating expenses, because it depends on the passengers paying for those additional charges.
Thank you so much for the breakdown. So let's move to an airline that's been very profitable, Etihad Airways. What do you make of their performance over the last 9 months?
Well, it's staggering. It's when you look at the percentage growth, whether it's like looking at profit growth, whether it's looking at passenger growth, whether it's looking at cargo revenue growth, it's a good news story. And it just goes to show that if you've got a strong strategy, a good operating environment, and you've got location opportunities as well, because that sort of, location in terms of travel and the large airlines with the big network is attractive to passengers. So it's a record-breaking profit, and I don't think it's the end. It's probably a future trajectory of where they're going to go. They are expanding with aircraft. They're growing in routes. It's what you want as an airline. Cost efficiency, leads to that profit as well. So they're doing all the right things, and I think it's a good news story on a very negative week for aviation.
And unfortunately, I'm taking you back to another negative story because I should have ended it on Etihad. But Boeing, the notices that they've put out for layoffs, I guess, well, what do you make of what's been going on with Boeing and what's to come in the future?
Well, I don't know how many times we're going to say that this is like one of the worst years for Boeing. We seem to be having annus horribilis, year after year with Boeing, whether it's, to do with the issues with production, strikes. They haven't really recovered since the pandemic. And so it's inevitable. They're going to need to really look at their business and reduce costs so that they can maintain the business as it sort of is in terms of importance in the sector. We've really got two main commercial aircraft manufacturers. And so Boeing is too big of a business to be allowed to fail. So it's painful what needs to be done, but I think it's inevitable.
Sindy Foster, Principal Managing Partner at Avaero Capital Partners, thank you so much for talking aviation with us. Always a pleasure having you. We appreciate your time.